If you live in a condo, serve on a board, or manage an apartment building, EV charging is no longer a future issue. It's appearing on agendas across the country. Is your building ready? This session, presented through Running Electric campaign coordinated by Équiterre and funded by Natural Resources Canada, focuses on what decision makers need to understand before moving forward. Licensed electrician Mark Marmer explains electrical capacity, load management, cost allocation, and what it actually takes to implement EV charging in multi-unit buildings. If your property is beginning this conversation, this session could save you time, confusion, and costly missteps. So let's begin.
Oh, perfect. So we're just going to do a little bit of high level. I'm an owner, and what can I do? And a little bit if you're coming in as say a board member or a manager in a building. So we're not going to get too deep into the weeds, but I want to give you a feel for what you could do. And then as we move towards the end, if there's some more technical questions, I'm happy to take them. I always find it's a good to just take a moment to tell about who we are at the beginning. Not so much a commercial, but just an understanding that we're a licensed electrical contractor. We've been in business almost 40 years now, and we do a whole variety of things from just sort of day-to-day electrical service. And this is a solar job. This job that you see here is the Buddhist temple. We just finished that a little while ago, so that got done, and a variety of other things. The condos themselves make up a big part of our business. That could just be day-to-day lighting and things of that nature. And so the confluence of us being able to manage EV charging and having these customers has given us sort of a depth over the last 8 or 9 years of servicing them. So that's why partly we're here today. So, and I know that we already did single family homes. That was sort of the last one. But so what's sort of the difference between getting a charger in a single family home and getting something in a condo? So the nice part of single family home, number one, is it's more economical. It's relatively simple to have charging, and as long as you've got a place to park the car and you've got a panel, we can usually figure out how to do that. And you make all the decisions, whether you're happy with the price and what have you. Condos don't really work that way. Condos require you to go to a board of directors who manage the infrastructure in the condo, and you have to ask permission. There's rules and laws that you have to overcome. And while you're very excited about getting your vehicle and your charger in, and you might be perfectly happy even at whatever the cost is going to be, sometimes these boards don't always see the same way you do, and a lot of it takes some kind of education in the background. It's a much more challenging process. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult for sure. So if you're in a condo, what's going to be our first step? So Jason will put up the next slide, and you will see this lovely smiling person. Hopefully this is just your property manager. Then you're going to go, just like you would for other things in a condo, you're going to go to your property manager and you're going to explain to them that you'd like an EV charger in your space. And if everybody's happy and everybody's smiling, it could be because they already have a process in place for it and know exactly what you're asking for. You're not the first one, and they have a system of intake, and it's relatively simple, and they're thrilled that you came forward. I would say that makes up, frankly, a very small amount, even to this day, of places that you can go to that will have this. It's still very challenging, but you need to start here. If you're not getting anywhere, there's ways to manage it, but I would start with the property manager at the beginning. Let's move along to see why it might have been easy. Perhaps you had a building that was 100% EV ready. This is something that's part of a Toronto Green Standard that's been around for a little while, and it was brought to my attention that even in Quebec and Laval, they have this EV charging, EV ready. I will tell you that when I go to buildings and the manager has called me and say that this building's EV ready, we've got chargers. I'm very excited to get over there and see what exactly that means. I came from one, frankly, this morning that has a good series of chargers. and we gave a recommendation for a charger for one of the residents, and the board came back and said, well, maybe we're not completely ready, and we would like to take a look at a load evaluation. We're happy to have them come in, but in the meantime, while they're thinking about this, it's holding up what this person needs, and the building wasn't 100% EV ready. It's only a certain percent EV ready. So some of the ones that already have chargers in their place are perfectly happy and they're being able to use it, but the building's trying to figure out what it is they're going to do for the other people in the building. So this can be challenging. I took a look at the panel this morning. The panel, even though it's a fairly large amperage, is nearly full, and there's a variety of other issues in terms of the way they're managing them. So we'll get through. We'll get a report going, and I've got already 2 residents that have come forward to us that would like to have charging in the building. So it's a bit of work to work its way through it, but we're at an early stage, and I'm happy to have the buildings come forward. If they ask smart questions, then we actually can help them and try to get if we get it set up and get it going right and get a good system, then it will be easier. And that conversation in the back hall with the manager will become easier and easier as time goes on. In the past, before the Condo Act got changed, this is the Condo Act in Ontario. I know a little bit of some of my stuff is a bit Ontario centric because we're located here in Toronto, and I'm familiar with the rules here. When I talk about things like right to charge, this is something that became available in British Columbia not that long ago as well. And the idea was that in the past, you would simply go to your property manager. You would say, I'd like to have a charger. They would go to the board. The board would say no, and that would really be the end of the discussion because the owner themselves had no real, there was no real way to move it forward. And at some point, the Condo Act got revised, and one of the revisions was to give some power to owners in condos. So here in Ontario, it's very, I will say it's very difficult by following the rules and following the steps for the board and property manager to say no. The allowances are very minimal, and there's not really any way to say no. But it still can be a very challenging process. The boards sometimes ask for all kinds of things that weren't necessarily part of the law, and it frankly leaves the owner when everybody's on the same page and they all want to move forward to having charging, and we're all moving to the same end, it's not a problem. But when we're butting heads, we end up with a very difficult situation, and we don't want to be having a situation where we're having to figure out how are we gonna get a lawyer to help us? Do I have to go to the condo authority and request some assistance? This is not really an ideal arrangement. And chances are, in order to do this, if you've got to this point and you want to follow these steps to be able to make an application, this is just a few little lines of what that application needs: drawing specifications, forms to be filled out, signed by this person and signed by that person. It's not that simple. I don't know that how, as a layperson, you would decide how best to do the installation and then how to write that out and provide a sketch of it. You'll see what we do here at Signature Electric. I just put a little circle around it. I would say that anybody that's sort of in this, that we have other people that we work with in the same field that are familiar with this, they will have some means of helping people to get an intake. So what will happen is if somebody clicked on this, is just on the front page of our website, it will take you to a page and start to sort out who you are. Are you an owner? Are you a property manager? You're on a board? Where are you? And start to collect the right information. And then when we get that, we're able to guide them. So what we want to do is, frankly, hold people's hands. This is not an easy thing to find. At one time, we got these calls from owners, and it's hard to help an owner. It's a lot of work, and there's not a ton of money involved in it, and it wasn't always making sense. And we said, look, we're getting all these owner requests. Let's find a smooth, reasonable way to manage them and not and be clear on the phone when you call, you do this, and I'm going to get this step and that step. And people have found this very helpful. And ultimately, what will happen is, say, as an example for us, what happens is you'll get a visit. Once you've organized with us, you'll figure out where you are, you'll get a visit. One of the things to do with getting the visit is we're going to reach out to your property manager and let them know that you're interested and request access to the building. I would say we're 98, 95%. There's never a problem. It's rare that they refuse access. And in fact, they probably can't actually do it, although sometimes we get a little bit of pushback. At that point, I find when I get to the buildings, I'm actually, they're quite happy to see us and it's perfectly fine. We'll figure out from the owner's perspective, what's the path of least resistance to try to get them a charger in their space and following the guidelines of the Condo Act. We'll give them ultimately the next step. We're going to give them a quotation and they'll say, oh, this is more money than I was thinking of spending. Thank you very much. And we can be finished there. Or they go, yeah, that seems to work for me. I'm okay with that. In which case, at that point, we'll put together the forms that are necessary to deliver to the corporation. And all the person has to do is sign it and put it on the manager's desk. When they do that, because of the rules of the Condo Act, they start a clock. There's a 60-day time clock. And the condo must respond. If they didn't respond, it's just they're assumed, at least in the rules, they're assumed to have accepted it. Although I'm not quite sure that even if you did, how you would actually get in there and install things without a specific allowance from the property manager. But it does what it was. The legislation does what it's intended to do. It lights a fire under everybody. It gets the board's attention and the manager will say, we have this request and we need to respond within a certain amount of time. When I'm speaking to boards, I'm telling them to try to get ahead of this. Start to think about, instead of waiting till you get this request and suddenly in a condo, 60 days is nothing. You can barely figure out what paint color to put in the lobby in 60 days. So what we do is say, why don't you get ready ahead of time? Start thinking about what you want to do. Even if you don't have anybody asking at the moment, make some decisions about it so that when this does happen and somebody seriously comes forward, you'll say, this is the plan. This is exactly how we're going to do it in the building. We've already agreed. We're not going to sit down for a series of meetings to go over it. So this is really the on the consumer end of it, how we do it. I will say it's getting smoother. It's getting better over time. At the beginning, it was very difficult. I had actually residents that actually sold their units and moved somewhere else because they just could not make any headway. I saw binders 4 or 5 inches thick of things to do with only one person's charging. Thankfully I don't see this too much anymore. So I'm pleased about that, and it tells me we're moving in the right direction. More of these EV ready buildings, that also makes it easier. Whether it's some percent or all, it keeps us moving forward and helps a lot. Let's move just to the next thing. So the other possibility is when you clicked on that button, it turned out that you weren't actually just a resident in the building, but you might have been a property manager or sometimes boards, or sometimes on a board we'll put together a committee that will manage EV charging. So we get those too, and I can sort them out right away. These are groups that are looking out for the whole community, for everybody rather than just themselves, which is a much better approach. And then once we get it settled in the building, if we can, then we don't have to have, then the extra additions come easy. So I stuck these two up here because this is sort of the two baskets that we end up with. And the community chargers that you see on the left. So when I say community chargers, I mean that these 2 spaces are available presumably for anybody in the building to use, and they'll share these spaces. This worked pretty good 4 or 5 years ago, because there really just weren't all that many vehicles, and a couple of chargers would sort of sort it out. And it's without a doubt a way more economical way to manage it. A lot of us on the call already will realize that it's hard to scale. If I start to scale out um, from two chargers, will I put four? Where will these, whose spaces are these that I have these spare spaces available to put them in? And then and then if I'm living in a condo, it's not a plaza at the corner. When I come down here at 10 o'clock and I need 3 hours to charge my car, it's the middle of the night now. It's unlikely that I'm going to want to move my car out, or that somebody else will move theirs in. So this has its limitations. So we don't see it as often. And I don't actually, when the boards come forward, I don't hear about this too much anymore, which is from my perspective, a good idea. Um, what you see on the right is more typical. This is a building in Oakville. They have quite a few chargers. These four just happen to be two and two, but each one of these chargers belongs to an individual. It's exactly the same as you having a charger at home. This is only your charger. Nobody else can use it. It's got a tap card authentication so that when you come to use it, nobody else can plug into your charger. You'll As part of the requirement of the Condo Act, this charger and the piping and wiring and electrical safety authority and anything else that went with it, and some legal fees and things, these are your responsibility. And if the charger doesn't work, it's your responsibility. The charger belongs to the person. So that's good from the perspective of the property management. They don't have to be involved in managing these chargers. And it's the advantage on simply is the way the law works anyways, but the advantage on the owner's end is that this is something that's going to carry on title when they move. So uh, in a lot of cases, when we see these chargers in the condos, we get a pretty good uptake now when we go. We used to get one or two, and then we would get some infrastructure in place. We would get one or two chargers, then we get a few more and a few more. We just finished a job, not this job in Oakville, but another one, and we had between two buildings 40 chargers right at the outset. People came forward. Well, I think you can imagine that there's probably not 40 new electric vehicles, or those people didn't have them. They just simply see value. If what For whatever this cost, I think they think that it's twice the value of what they paid for it. And then it gives them, so even if they never get an electric car, when the unit sells, they're selling a unit with an amenity, which they like. And then the other piece is, if it was me, I would prefer to have my charger before I brought my car home, whether it was in my house or wherever, so that I know that I'm going to have a very smooth transition to my EV. So this gives them a chance to put it on. Sometimes they'll put a bag over these to keep them clean and what have you. So people do see these as a real advantage, and I the ones that are more successful when we put the infrastructure and whatever is, that are the ones that will take the time to communicate with the residents, and tell them proudly about what they're going to do. A lot of the times the kickback I get is, well, we're putting all this money in up front to put, because I can imagine that there's some electrical panels and things that had to be put in for this up front. We're putting all this in for one or two people. I said, you're going to be surprised. First of all, you might legally have to put it in for one or two people. That's one possibility. But look at it on a positive note and think about what you're doing. Talk about it positively, and you will be surprised at the uptake. And when the building I was talking to you about with the 40 chargers, a lot of the chatter was, well, we're older people and what have you. And that age thing just simply didn't work. They were they were smart enough to see what the value would be, and I don't think that the cost was a problem for people owning these sort of really nice condos down by the water. So don't assume because of a certain age of the build of people in the building that they wouldn't they wouldn't put these chargers in. I told you I wouldn't get too technical, but I want to get a little technical. So Jason's going to move to the next thing, and I'm going to show you This is just a main service. I see these 6 times a week. This is the main service that comes into your building. And this is the ultimately, with very few exceptions, this is the amount of electricity that we have available to use. This would be either in a new build or an existing building. The chargers that I showed you are not just regular home chargers. They have an ability to interact both for billing and for what we call load management. I can turn the output of the chargers up and down, and the goal is to try to have as many chargers as possible using as little of this electricity as possible. And we now we monitor the panels that we put in, we monitor the mains to be able to make the best use of that electricity at any given time. Certain times, even in heavier usage times of the day, we find that there's more energy available. If I can make that energy available to the chargers, that means that the people that are using the chargers will have a much more positive experience. Again, if I just wanted to talk about load management, I could probably spend a half an hour on load management at all. So we're just going to move ahead a little bit more. I just want to, so I've told you whatever I've told you. Imagine that you're a board member or property manager and you're trying to sort things out. This list that I have here, this is just a list. This isn't even up to date. There's way more people. Some of these people are installers, they're software providers, they're providers of charging equipment. It could be a combination of those things. I didn't include really too many actual contractors here. We could end up with a charger in what sort of, when I say condominium, I think everybody pictures this picture that I have here, this sort of tower. It just, this is simply not the reality. Buildings look all kinds of buildings look all kinds of different shapes. It could be a condominium townhomes are with individual meters are managed in a different way than we would do for a high rise with the service that I showed you. Apartments are another challenge. Apartments tend to be a bit older, so they don't always have as much electricity. Apartment dwellers do not have the access to the right to charge or the Condo Act, so that's a bit more challenging. But we're coming up with imaginative ideas for apartment owners. One of the nice things about apartment owners is that they have control over the space. They can move chargers into particular spots and make a little zone like we talked about. Even that could be your assigned area, or they might do well with a few chargers. It's a possibility. So we try to work with them a little more challenging. We don't really want you to be paralyzed. We want you to find somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, who has a depth of experience. I'm trying to show you how many things you need to know, how long it took us to figure all this out, to be able to try to break it down, look at the situation in your building, and decide how I can explain that to you in a simple a format as possible. Because I can tell you that education is the actual doing of the work is relatively easy, but educating them, helping them through their finances, ultimately what's probably happening in say a condominium as an example, is they don't actually have this money in the budget to do this work. They have to find this money or find a way to, how are they going to recoup it over time? Where are they going to do this? And you have to be sensitive to this, and you have to try to find ways, if you can, for them to be able to maybe work their way into the system. Our last slide and is this is really the message I'm trying to tell you. One size doesn't fit all, either for the owners or for the property managers or for the properties. They don't all look the same, and they don't all to be treated the same. You need to figure out a way to find a professional that's going to help you and guide you through this process, and then that's the best way to move forward. So hopefully that's been helpful, and if we're lucky, we've got some questions that have been sparked here. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, great, Mark. Thanks very much. Obviously, this is a subject that you could get into the weeds with very easily.
Yeah.
A lot to cover and a lot of, like as you say, one size doesn't fit all. So it's hard to answer every possible scenario. But we do have some questions, Jason, and I know Jason's been keeping an eye on them. So I looked quickly, some good ones there.
Okay.
Jason, would you mind jumping in here and taking us through some of those?
So our top question right now is, would it be possible and less expensive to install dedicated 240-volt outlets for charging so that owners can use the charging station that comes with their vehicle? What advantages and disadvantages do you think that approach would take?
Well, we talked a little bit about load management. So again, when we say not one size fits all, usually we load manage at the charger end. We will be able to turn the charger up and down to allow for more people to charge. If I if I did what you suggested, was just put in a receptacle, I would, if it's a 50 amp receptacle, I have to provide power at 50 amps. And it would, if it didn't have some means of control on the back end, then it would be considered 100% load. And I would put a 400 amp panel in, which would serve, I think, 15 chargers. Well, that's a pretty big panel to serve very few chargers. And the reality is it doesn't, wouldn't really be used that way. People only need a few hours to charge. And so if I could charge more cars overnight, people, even frankly speaking, even in a residence, I'm not a lover of plugging in the charger. First of all, the chargers don't all come with the cars anymore. This used to be. Now even Tesla has gotten away from it. It was a stepping stone for them to put these in, and ultimately Tesla would like you to put in a charger on the wall, hardwire it in. That's why you can buy these things, but they don't come with it. We lose this opportunity for load management, and the load management is so critical. And then there's the other piece. So now it's fine if I give up the load management. The electricity that you use got paid for by somebody else, got paid for by the building, and the building would like to recoup that. So how will I meter that information, that charging stuff, so that I can get it back? When I use network charging, this is all part of the Open Charge Point protocol. That's the back end of the charging system, and it happens relatively seamlessly. And like the slide that I showed you, there's a whole variety of back-end providers that help to do this billing and power management and authentication. That's the other piece. If I put a plug in the wall, I suppose it's possible for your neighbor to use it. It never occurred to me that somebody would go down into a garage and either park in somebody else's space or use somebody else's charger, but it turns out it actually does happen. So having some security is valuable. So, I mean, this is the reason. Honestly, if I could thought something was a much cheaper and simpler thing, I would do it. It would be happy. It would make perfect sense. But there's a reason that and a variety of reasons that we've sort of gotten to this solution. Hopefully that answers the question. Every time you put a plug, you have another place of failure. You plug it in. It's not a small load. It's not like plugging in your alarm clock beside your bed. It's like plugging in your stove, turning on all the elements and the broiler, and then leaving it on for 3.5 hours. That's a little tough on those receptacles, and we do see those receptacles burn out from time to time. We now have manufacturers making more robust receptacles because there's a demand in the marketplace. Frankly speaking, from my perspective, I just put the charger on the wall. They're not that expensive. Hardwire it in, and the chargers in my house have been there for 8 years now. The same chargers, they work like a charm.
That was something I was going to mention. I've heard that those receptacles really don't like being plugged and unplugged and replugged.
Yeah, for sure. And that's even worse, right? You make, at least at home, you probably just plugged it in and left it plugged in. At the condo, that's not going to happen. You're going to unplug every single day. That's just going to exacerbate the situation.
Okay, we have another one. This is a bit of a long one. So, the Canadian government's recently stated their intent with an 80 million commitment for more level 2 or fast chargers. Does the Canadian building code affect provincial building codes, and can it require the installation of charging infrastructure for all parking spaces?
So this is a very interesting thing. So I mentioned earlier one of the slides, and we talked about Quebec, and we talked about Toronto, who have a green standard that requires 100% EV ready. So keep in mind that even when that got announced, what happened was there was a period of time for the that would start from the time that the people put the drawings forward. Not so buildings that were already underway, they didn't have to comply, and it would take 2 or 3 years in time past the legislation for even for you to see the first building come up. Buildings take several years to get built, so it took a while. That's Toronto doing that. When I'm on a government group which meets the government, it's coming up again, the Ontario government. Uh, we say to the Ontario government, well, why don't you just do the same thing? Let's just make this happen all the way through Ontario. And wouldn't that be nice? Because we would then everybody would have EV charging, and when you moved in, it's so much less. It just doing it when the building is built is great for everybody. It's less expensive when it gets installed. You can imagine that the difference between putting some conduit in the slab and everything as you're pouring it, as opposed to piping it on the surface, and then if everything's ready and the wires are hanging out the wall, for the end user, it's just a matter of putting the charger on, connecting it. Everybody's really happy, and ultimately, the people that are in these buildings, they're the ones that pay for everything, one way or another. When if you're paying for it because you need it afterwards, or you bought it as part of the building, you paid for it because everything in the building got paid for by these people. I think if they were shown everything at the beginning and given a choice, it would be obvious to them that this is what they would like. And if I had to find another couple of $1,000s when I was putting my mortgage together, that's a hell of a lot easier than finding $4,000 or $5,000 later on and fighting with my property manager. The problem was the government isn't too thrilled with adding more expenses to the developers and builders. They're very hesitant to do it. The charges are something that happens at the end of a building process when the budgets are very tight. Then the person you're speaking to might not be the person who's really related to the building code. And then the last time I heard was, well, I mean, that's fine for, I understand that you want that on Bay Street downtown, but when we do it for a condo, that's the same condo in Muskoka or Owen Sound. Did you want it treated the same way? Well, from my perspective, I think the answer would be no, but they didn't exactly see it this way. So, I mean, it could be Canada-wide if we wanted to. There just needs to be, enough interest in doing it. And listen, it's a very challenging moment right now in the economy in general and in building right now. A lot of these condo builders are finding that they can't turn their product over. Some of them are making them into apartment buildings. The ones that haven't started the building or have stopped building it. It's put people out of work. In the meantime, it's very challenging. So these are not easy discussions. But I know that was maybe a complicated question with a complicated answer. Do you think I caught it there, Jason?
Yeah, it is a big deal for something countrywide.
I look even at the houses. At one time, the game plan we came up with we're going to make 200 amp services in a house and ask you to run the wire into the garage. Oh, that sounds like a pretty small ask. That lasted 5 minutes, and the government said, no, that's putting an undue onus on the builders, and we're not going to do it.
Part of this is about future proofing, though. I mean, we know what's coming in terms of electrification. It's almost crazy to think about a brand new building or one that's partway through and being finished that doesn't address the infrastructure, at least rough it in, right, for EVs because they're coming.
I think this group is absolutely agreeing on that.
Okay, next one. This is something you touched on. They're asking, even if community chargers are no longer the norm for condos, do you think that they're the best options for rentals?
I think probably realistically, some kind of thing like that, it would work better in a rental. Let's just divide rentals into two things. We have brand new rental buildings that we put chargers in, exactly the way I talked about, a bank of 10 or 20 chargers, and people use these chargers when they come. I'm telling you that these chargers are occupied and used immediately. People are thrilled. These become their spaces, and then they're willing to expand. Keep in mind now we're talking about a slightly higher end type of rent, a nicer, newer building. They've got newer infrastructure. There was some planning that came. These are very popular in new builds, and also that the developer does have to actually rent the spaces. So having some amenity that helps the spaces rented is good. That being said, we don't see a ton of rentals, but some of that might change. What most of us think about are your sort of 1960s, 1970s, 1980s buildings. These buildings tend to have more challenging electrical problems because the way that people are using electricity in their suites now, whether it's dishwashers or air conditioners or whatever the case is, we used to use a lot more electricity, and the buildings don't have a ton left over, and they tend to be fully rented. So they're not needing if there isn't something in it for the owner, they're not needing it. So sometimes that's what we try to marry together. A very low cost or maybe even no cost to the owner, a little bit of a revenue share, kind of like you would imagine washers and dryers, right? People need washers and dryers. The owner gives them a space to do it. The washer dryer people take care of everything and kicks back or provides a little rent to these places, and everybody's sort of happy. I think that could very well work in a rental building, and you could see how it is. You keep in mind that in a condo, they're obligated to take care of everybody. So it doesn't matter where my space is. A rental building does not have the same obligation. So if it turns out that it's a bit too busy at the chargers, well, you'll find something else or you'll do something else. But they're a harder group to deal with, and because the jobs are smaller, there's less interest from installers to deal with them because there's just as much work talking to them and convincing them to put in 2 chargers as it took me to get somebody to put in 40 chargers. So, that's a challenge as well. But my answer, yes, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, I'm going to consolidate a few kind of related questions. So someone's asking, on average, what would it cost a user to purchase a level 2 charging station for their slot? And what would it cost in Toronto for, I guess, for a year for electricity?
Okay.
Roughly.
No, it's okay. I purposely did not get into sort of a sales piece to this. I didn't want to, it was confusing enough as it was when I start to lay over all kinds of things where you could lease something or somebody else could own it in the meantime, or you could rent it, or if I started down that road, number one, I'm not an expert in everybody's sales technique, but it's another layer that makes it very complicated for even well-meaning boards to be able to figure out what the best decision is and how to move ahead. So let's just talk about it for a sec. It's okay. Uh, I think by the time you have a sort of a day's labor and some pipe and some wire and what have you, you might have spent $3,000 or $4,000 putting in a charger. Maybe a bit more, depends how far you are. We try to, when we're setting, I didn't get into this in the slides, but the setting up of the infrastructure properly to try to keep the runs not too long for people is what helps to keep the cost at a reasonable level for everybody. You can imagine that a charger that's 100 feet from a panel and one that's 400 feet from the panel are not going to cost the same amount. The chargers are a little more expensive than what you get in your home because they're OCPP chargers, they're network chargers, so they're a bit more expensive. There's also going to be likely some legals. You're going to need to put this on title, and that could be another $750, depending on what the lawyer's charging. You'll deal with the condo's lawyer, could be $1,000. So I don't know. You could be 4, 5, 6, something like that. That might be not unreasonable, just to give people something to hang their hat on. In terms of electricity, it's depending on how you're doing it per kilowatt hour, $1 an hour, something like that. Keep in mind that the rate is set by the person that if it's in a condo, the condo board will set the rate. If it was at an apartment, you might find that it's frankly like you would get in the public, 2.25 an hour or something like that, where there's some profit in it. Usually in the condos, we try to keep it even so that they're just paying for the electricity. I don't know if Tim might want to suggest what, a month's worth of electricity would be.
It'll be, I can tell you, it'll probably be a smaller amount than the amount of gas you would have used if you'd been driving a gas car. That's all I can say for sure, because it totally depends on how much you drive and how much electricity you use. But it'll boil down to, if you compare the two, that you're farther ahead with electric than with gas, regardless of anything else.
And Tim and I are very recently very busy trying to change the narrative a little bit, because this question about how much I appreciate how much the charger cost is important, but what does it cost to put electricity in the car and this and that? I'm hoping that most of the people in this call drive already an electric vehicle or are going to drive an electric vehicle. Try it. You'll see it's a completely different experience. And I think that ultimately it will be less expensive, but at some point or other, let's just simply buy the vehicle that, just like you did with gasoline vehicles, buy the vehicle that suits you, whether it's we're getting better on price. We're not quite there yet, but whether it's price wise or finish or whatever it is, find what suits you, be happy with it. And it's a very nice experience driving an electric vehicle. So cost aside, because those things can change, right?
Yeah, as we say, nobody buying a gas car today really walks into dealership and says, "What's the cheapest one you got? That's the one I want." They're looking for certain features, benefits, and a platform that suits their lifestyle, and it's the same with electric.
Yeah, and I think we'll soon have. We need to work a little bit more on the. I think we're getting away from charging, but a little more on the lower end. We still cars in general are still quite expensive, so hopefully some of that's going to be able to be taken care of soon. I won't stray too far from what the topic was.
And I think, Jason, we said we'd keep this to about 45 minutes, and we're darn close to it. But let's some really great questions here. Maybe we can do one more if there's a juicy.
And I can speed through a little bit more if you want me to. I don't mind.
One more quick one. Someone's asking, if I don't drive too much, what do you think about just a regular 120-volt plug in my parking spot?
Okay, so this is two slightly different questions. If again, I think people are looking to save money. You may have a difficulty getting somebody to allow you to put a 120-volt parking charging thing in your condo, but you might do it at home. So I just want to comment on this sort of level one. This is our level one, level two, level three discussion. If you happen to have, say, a plug-in hybrid with about 50 kilometers of range, and you plugged it in every night in your home, this may be completely adequate and work like a charm. And if you didn't drive too often, that's correct, and it might work perfectly fine. The problem is I don't have power management. I don't have any way to measure I don't have an easy way to measure the energy that's being used. It becomes more complex, and it might not be allowed. But yeah, it's people manage, actually, surprisingly. Some people, depending on what their driving habits are, they can manage this way. Most of us want a little more flexibility than that.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing your expertise, and thank you to everyone who joined us and for your thoughtful questions. You'll find helpful resources and links in the description below. If you found this video valuable, subscribe for more practical EV insights and expert discussions. Thanks for watching, and thank you to Running Electric and Équiterre for initiating this important conversation.